buen día. Good morning. Welcome to the session. My name is Claudio Providas. I'm a representative from the United Nations UNDP here in Brazil. But today, they have added some circularity into my role, so I will be facilitating and moderating the following session. Let me begin by welcoming all of you to this session and thanking particularly our partners and speakers, distinguished speakers, for joining us in convening a conversation around circular innovation, policies, and finance for a responsible critical minerals life cycle. Circular economy approaches need to be embedded through the critical transition mineral life cycle if growing investments in these sectors are to generate multiple SDGs dividends for people and planet through a just transition. We will hear from our partners in the European Investment Bank and the International Resource Panel how to steer investments in the mineral life cycle that are responsible, fair, and catalyze multiple sustainable development dividends. We will also hear about policies and technological innovation that can drive green and circular transition across the critical minerals value chains. Finally, we will discuss how whole of society, whole of government, and human rights-based approaches can ensure that the extraction and the use of critical energy transition minerals drives fair and equitable shared prosperity, safeguard biodiversity, promotes good governance, and meaningful contributes to the SDGs. Dear colleagues, in that spirit, I would like to welcome you once again to this dialogue and pass the stage to the opening remarks. We will have a short video, I believe.
Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, bom dia. Welcome to this important dialogue on circularity and critical transition. Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, bom dia. Welcome to this important dialogue on circularity and critical transition minerals. The United Nations Development Programme is pleased to partner on this event with CITRA, the Finnish Innovation Fund, the Federation of Industry of the State of São Paulo, the International Resource Panel, the Brazilian National Confederation of Industry, and the European Investment Bank. Our speakers today will highlight how advancing circularity across mineral value chains is central to accelerating progress on the Paris Agreement, the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and the 2030 Agenda. At COP28, countries agreed to triple global renewable capacity by 2030. This will almost triple the demand for critical energy transition minerals by 2030 and quadruple it by 2040. Our session will highlight several entry points for responding to this challenge. First, innovative technologies are needed to ensure that mineral value chains fully leverage their potential for nature-positive, low-emission investments. Second, critical mineral policies need to be integrated into broader nature, climate, and development planning frameworks, including national biodiversity strategies and action plans, nationally determined contribution, and integrate national financial frameworks. UNDP is working with country stakeholders to advance this integration through our Climate Promise, Nature Pledge, and Zero Waste offer. Third, finance is needed to catalyze more environmentally and socially responsible mining. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, if we are to harness the full potential of circular economy approaches that deliver multiple SDG dividends, we need to forge stronger partnerships within and across governments, business, indigenous peoples, youth, women, and civil society for local to global levels. This means promoting whole of society, human rights-based approach, and facilitating South-South and triangular cooperation. I wish you a successful discussion and look forward to working together to scale up and accelerate circularity solutions for people, planet, and prosperity. And I enjoy my home country of Brazil. Grande abraço.
Thank you very much. We just heard from Marcos Neto. Marcos is actually from Belém, and he's the UN Assistant Secretary General and the head for UNDP's Policy Bureau. Now I'm delighted to invite Mr. Ambroise Fayol, Vice President of the European Investment Bank, to deliver his remarks. Thank you very much. Please, make room for you.
Thank you very much, and good morning to you all. I will be brief. Actually, I agree with the messages that Marcos Neto has just given. Let me start by thanking the organizers for convening such a timely and important discussions here today, and I look forward to the conversation. I will start with presenting the European Investment Bank. Let's make some self-promotion here. The bank is the Bank of the European Union, and we are targeting projects of investment projects throughout the world, but mostly in Europe, that have a high climate content, and it includes maximizing circular economy approaches in our projects. We have had last year a record level of circular economy projects worth 1.4 billion euros in our activity. Actually, today I would have four things that I would like to pass to you before leaving the floor for the conversation. The first one is, what I find interesting with circular economy solutions is that they contribute both to managing demand for material and resources and having an impact on securing supply. And actually, when you look at the way these projects work, they are managing demand by promoting better design, durability, repairability, etc. And they are also securing supply by increasing the share of secondary material that are in the economy, and by taking more control of key supply chains to maximize recycling, etc. And I think this is particularly worth for critical raw materials that are going to be discussed. And the capacity for circular economy to address both supply and demand is very important when it comes to critical raw materials, because critical raw materials are the backbone of modern economies. And what we can hope is that as demand rises, it is essential that we maximize circularity for the sustainable use of critical and strategic materials. So that's the interesting that I find in dealing with critical raw material in the context of circular economy. The second message is that's much better. The second message is that, and we see that in particular in Europe, but it is true elsewhere. Most countries are heavily dependent on imports of those critical raw materials. And actually, this is an issue that we see as in Europe as energy independence, as critical raw material being an element of the strategic autonomy. And that's why looking at the supply chain is so important. And it goes from mining, processing, refining, recycling, material substitution, etc. We have at EIB an objective that is to increase significantly the amount of projects that we finance for critical raw materials in Europe or outside Europe, but in particular in Europe, of 2 billion euros per year. That is something that we think is going to help us design better products and also deal better efficiently with critical raw material and the risk they have to exhaust also the planet. The third element that has changed in the recent past in dealing with critical raw materials is that it is more and more seen as part of competitiveness and as part of an industry policy. And when you look at the Clean Industrial Deal that has been presented by the European Commission 2 months ago, it is absolutely clear that critical raw materials, reducing our raw material use, doing more circular economy, are objectives that are seen as absolutely essential if we want to increase competitiveness and to help reduce, to build an industrial policy in Europe. And I have a final point, and I'll stop there. All these changes are changes that are disruptive. And when you have, and everything related to climate is something that has the potential to be disruptive, as all transitions are. And that's why you cannot deal with critical raw material issues without having in mind clearly the need to have the just part of the just transition very well in mind. And that's what we do with our colleagues in other multilateral development banks, to the UNDP as well. This is something that is extremely important, that the transition is inclusive and just, and that we prioritize affordability for vulnerable citizens. And I'll stop there. I wish you a very, very productive session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Fayol. Next, we're going to invite the speakers in the panel, but I believe there will be a short video on instructions, if I'm right, on how to access the resource so you can formulate some questions to the panelists later on. I would like to invite our first speaker, Professor Paul Jenkins, from the International Resource Panel. Paul Jenkins has a PhD in economics from the University of London and is a professor in the International Resource Panel. Mr. Rinaldo Mancin from the IBRAM, the Sustainability Director from IBRAM. IBRAM is the Brazilian Mining Institute. Mrs. Stanley Catalina Diaz, the Circular Lead for the Ministry of Environment in Colombia. Please, a round of applause. And last but not least, Mrs. Xiaoting Sheng, Program Manager at Ellen MacArthur Foundation, in charge of the Beijing office. Thank you very much. I will formulate the first question for Mr. Paul Ekins. Dr. Ekins, you have been leading the recent IRP analysis looking at financing the responsible supply of energy transition minerals. Could you share some of the findings of this assessment? How should the financing of critical transition minerals be reformed to promote environmentally and socially responsible mining?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a great pleasure to be here, so thank you for the invitation. And yes, the International Resource Panel has been looking at this question of financing the responsible supply of energy transition minerals for sustainable development. So each of those elements is important, and we're looking at enormous financing. So the last estimate of the International Energy Agency for their net zero emission scenario was that these energy transition minerals would need investment by 2040 of $800 billion US. What is clear is that most of that investment will need to come from private sector sources, We therefore needed to understand in this report what mining is, and mining is a very complicated and capital-intensive business. Why investors choose to invest in mining, because they have lots of opportunities, and will they invest in $800 billion over the next 15 years? I'm an economist and not a financier, so I needed to get into finance. And I found that it has a certain aura of complexity, and people think they don't understand it, but actually it's very simple. Investors want a balance between risk and return. The higher the risk, the higher the return has to be. And mining is a very risky business and a very expensive business. We were interested in responsible mining, so mining with high environmental, social, and governance criteria, and that introduces more risk or less risk. The more risk comes from the fact that it might be more expensive to mine in that way. The less risk is that if you mine responsibly, you're much less likely to experience conflicts. And I've talked to enough mining companies now to know that the environmental, social governance factors are among their highest risks or opportunities. So there is an interesting balance there for investors that they need to take into account, that responsible mining may be more expensive, and in a very competitive commodities market, that means it may become more difficult to sell their products. On the other hand, it might avert conflicts and enable the mine to continue functioning in a normal kind of way, which will reduce costs. There's a very small part of the finance industry that might be called sustainable finance, which include investors who themselves individually believe that environmental, social, and governance issues are important, and they are prepared to take some of the risk of that kind of activity. That kind of activity grew very greatly over the sort of 10 to 15 years in the past, but is now experiencing a great loss of finance because of the kind of geopolitical situation in which we find ourselves. And in my view, that is a trend that needs to be reversed, and needs to be reversed quite quickly if we are to see the sustainable supply of these energy transition minerals, which are fundamentally important. And you may think, well, what's that got to do with circular economy? Well, in 5 or 10 years, it will have everything to do with circular economy, because once we have these minerals in our economies, we have to keep them there. But at the moment, we don't have enough of them, so we will need primary mining of these materials for at least the next 15 years. And that means that we need responsible finance for responsible mining. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ekins, and we have heard about this dichotomy. And now we are going to hear about Mr. Mancin, the other side of the equation from the mining sector. We have heard from Dr. Ekins what have been the advanced thinking of financing for critical transition minerals. What are the perspectives of the industry? How have you been observing the growing demand for an adoption of circular innovations in the sector? And what's the current state of the circular innovation in the Brazilian mining sector? Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We represent the mining industry branch, the typical mine association, We have about 300 associates, 82 are mine companies. We representing 85% of the Brazilian mining GDP. It doesn't matter the newspapers you open now, you're gonna see the information, critical minerals, geopolitics, war. Listen, critical minerals are up now. It's been used as a tool for peace or a tool for war. No? So we are in the middle of the hurricane. No? Mining in Brazil is a little bit not so big sector. We represent 4% of the economy here, but we are one of those three key sectors in the economy. We are investing now in Brazil $70 billion for the next 4 years. No? Some movements are very impressive. Mining is moving to the southeast, to the Amazon. When you move to the Amazon, Mr. Chair, problems arise. No? You have protected areas, you have indigenous areas. Listen, majority of the investments we are receiving goes to the new projects, very new projects, greenfield projects. But it's interesting, some new projects are requesting as a primary target tailings. For example, we have in Poços de Caldas, not too far from here, older exploration of uranium. It's possible to find rare earth elements. So people are applying to do primary mining on tailings that comes from uranium exploration. Very interesting because they are rich in uranium. The same case we have with niobium tailings. No, people are extracting rare earths, but cost a lot of money. No, as Professor Elkins said, mining is not for beginners. Mining is a very tricky business, long-term process. No, transform circular economy in business is the trick. This is the answer. We have to transform this, but we have some problems, especially in terms of the profitability of the businesses. No? And of course, we have some technical limitations. Nowadays, it makes more sense to open a new mining because you could have more success than you try to implementing a recycling project, for example. And of course, there is a lot of difficulties to obtain good concentration of minerals in tailings. Why? Because they were processed in the past. We have good examples here in Brazil, Mr. Chair, relate to civil constructions, materials for bricks, materials for asphalt. We have good examples here for fertilizers. People could processing tailings from minerals and obtain fertilizers. Small numbers of metallics, very difficult to extract metallics. Why? Because the concentration is so low, no? But we have heard about good projects trying to obtain copper, for example, from tailings. Not so easy. We are in the middle of the hurricane, but the good part is mining is one of the answers. If you'd like to have climate change solutions, if you like to have clean energy, you can only depend on mine sector. It doesn't matter the energy you are talking about will demand minerals. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, and certainly we will build the solution together. I don't want to do the flag waving of Brazil, but Brazil is doing a lot in terms of circularity right now. There's a new policy law, there's 70 action points, but also we have in different sectors experiences that show very clearly, I think, in the textile sector, circularity alone has brought $480 billion in savings. So I hope that we can have that discussion and keep moving forward in this healthy ecosystem, and thanks for the dialogue. Now we're going to hear from Slendy Diaz from Colombia, and we've heard about the advanced trends in finance, the technological innovation towards circularity in the critical mineral sector. In what ways are countries already integrating circular economy approaches into the critical transition mineral life cycle? And if you could share some best practices from Colombia, what enabling environment, regulatory frameworks, incentives and disincentives have your government been promoting?
Thank you, Claudio. First of all, I want to thank UNDP team for this wonderful invitation and to the theme of World Circular Economy Forum. Public policies must be implemented to bring concrete solutions to real problems. The energy transition requires us to increase the efficient use of the energy at the same time that we increase the capacity to create and to bring non-conventional renewable energy sources and cleaner energies, because we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We do have to deal with the climate change, so they come together with all of that. In this sense, we must consider not only solar and wind energy, but also non-conventional renewable energy sources. In Colombia, we have regulation that, first of all, promote the energy efficiency, and on the other hand, we increase the capacity for non-conventional renewable sources by offering incentives. And we also have policies for mining formalization. Another point is that these incentives have increased the installed capacity of non-conventional renewable energy sources, and there are also incentives for cleaner technologies, which encourage the implementation of more efficient technologies for the mining and for the energy sector. As a result, we have increased the production of biofuels, hydropower, refuse-derived fuel, tar-derived fuel, while energy efficiency strategies have improved the energy productivity. I want to highlight some circular approaches to the life cycle of critical minerals. The first one, we can increase the productivity and the efficiency of existing mines by extracting several minerals. We can't have one mine per mineral. Minerals naturally are combined in the soil. So we can bring more minerals from one mine to reduce the extraction of dispersed minerals. Remember that the principal reason that we are losing biodiversity and the principal aspect that also is related to the climate change is the changes in the use of the land. So we can be, if we can be more productive for each mine, we can reduce the extraction of minerals by separate. Rather than discarding the tailings, as you mentioned, tailings can be recovered on-site or by a third party to recover copper, nickel, bring other materials, clays, and to produce other materials and to keep them in use in the market. It also helps us to create new jobs. Other alternatives that we have is to recover the minerals and the residual mine wastewater, or we can produce aggregates for construction and demolition waste to reduce the extraction of virgin raw materials. And I also find important to say that we need to produce more durable goods because we want non-renewable resources in use for longer. And it comes together with the alternative to provide services related to the life extension of the devices. Another important strategy is extended producer responsibility. And finally, the implementation of best practices, best available techniques, climate-smart mining, and rehabilitation strategies at the end of the life that can be done together with the communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Slendy, and on the experience of Colombia, another mega diverse neighboring country and very active in circular economy. Now we move on to you, Ms. Xiaoting Cheng from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I think we're going to hear about the global experience and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation Circular Economy Network has been promoting innovation globally. And if you could share some of the examples on public-private partnerships promoting circularity across critical minerals value chains, including in urban mining, please. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair's question, and it's really a pleasure to be here. To begin, maybe just let me quickly introduce the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Our organization is a global organization working towards accelerate the transition to circular economy. And over the past 15 years, we already help put the circular economy into a solution for business, for policymakers, to address the global challenges. We heard a lot from climate change to biodiversity loss and resource scarcity. And we have built a really strong business and policy network and to help them to advance the circular solutions in plastic, fashion, and food. And right now, we really see a great opportunity in advance the circular economy for critical raw materials during this transition. And why and how? I think we heard a lot, the COP28 countries agree to triple the renewable energy capacity by 2030. So that's a really great news for climate action. But in the meantime, it also means a massive surge in demand for critical minerals such as lithium, nickel, and cobalt. And just to maybe give you an idea, for lithium itself alone, by 2040, the demand for that will grow 40 times between now and 2040, and it's about 20 to 25 times growth for nickel and cobalt. So that's meaning the shift, from the fossil-built system to a material-based system needs us to consider how we source, use, and recover these very, valuable materials. So that's where we consider circular economy come in. We really believe circular economy can help, to support this more resilient and sustainable circular supply chain for critical minerals. So how we think can achieve that? We really see three big opportunities ahead of us, and we really see some of the leading business and the government are already doing the good practice. The first one is rethinking the system, product and business model. That means we need to design products such as EV battery or wind turbines for more life cycle, which means to make them more easier to recycle, reuse, repurpose, recover. So we see the EU Critical Raw Material Act already made the mandatory requirement on product design, including the EV battery and the electronics. And also we can think about the ownership shift model, such as offering a product as service model. So by that, materials can be more kept in the circulation and serve more people. A case from that is from a Chinese manufacturing for the EV battery, which is the largest CATL. They already aimed to build a 1,000 swap shop in China, by 5. And I think that they have the plan to expand that to 10,000, in the near future. So we can see how this model, the ownership shift model can work. And second is to consider the material we use, such as where possible, we can eliminate the materials which are hard to recycle or, just carrying more environmental risks. For example, we see, the leading business in the EV battery already considering, the lithium to the sodium, battery, which are more abundant and also, can be more safer, to people and the environment. So finally is scale up recycling and urban mining. We already heard the panelists talk about that. So for now, we really see the first generation of the renewable energy technology reaches end of life. So circular economy really has its opportunity to see how we can recover those kind of valuable materials, and urban mining, recovering from the material from end-use product and also from the tech infrastructures are the key of that. But the thing is how we can build a system, such as how we can really make the take-back scheme or the reverse logistic work in the real life to make it work. I think this is something really gave us the thinking of that. And finally, to end, what the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is doing, because it's not a vision anymore, it's really the action happening. So currently, we are leveraging a mission to take this forward, to trying to influencing the investment towards the scale up of the circular supply chain for critical minerals. And we do basically 4 areas of things. First is how we can shift the narrative, how we can embed the circular economy thinking and principles into the, renewable energy transition. And second, we want to articulate a common shared supply chain vision for specific end-life products. We'll start with EV battery, electronics, and also wind turbine, cover the renewable area and also the tech area. And certainly, we will develop a roadmap to influencing the investment opportunities, to scale up or to put more effort onto to adopt the circular economy principle. And finally, we'll orchestrate, projects, how we can use specific projects to activate stakeholders, policies, technologies, and investment into this journey. So I think the information from sharing today will also like an invitation, to the audience or the institution who are interested in this journey. We are really welcome this whole, joint force together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Xiaoting Chen. I see we already have a couple of questions. But before we take from the floor, and we have a great incentive in terms of time management because there's lunch at the end of the line. So let's move very quickly to the second round, and it's about responsible investments, fair and how they can become fair and to catalyze multiple sustainable development dividends. So I will start again with you, Dr. Ekins, and how could the finance sector ensure the equitable distribution of economic, social, and financial benefits?
Well, thank you, Claudio. The short answer is that the financial sector cannot ensure that. And I'd like you just to have a mental experiment. So we've got our investment. We've invested in mines in Brazil or somewhere else. We've got the commodities. It has been sent to the London Metal Exchange or the Shanghai Metal Exchange or one of the other metal exchanges. It has been sold for some price, and the price may well have changed enormously from when the investment was made because the prices go up and down like yo-yos, but we have some money from selling this metal. The distribution question is, who gets the money that comes from this? Well, we've heard that the finance guys, the investors, they would not have invested without certain assurances, so they get some of the money. The company wants to make profits. It has to pay its managers, its workforce. It wants further investments. It wants to make further investments in mining, so it wants some of the money. The local communities, who may have been very heavily disrupted, they want money from that. Some of them may have been employed, so they may have had some jobs, but they may also want schools, and they may also want other kinds of facilities, so they want some money. And the host government, Brazil, in the case of Brazil, it will have a taxes and royalty system in order to take some of the money for the country to finance the public sector. And the question is, who gets what slices of this pie? And that is a very, very complicated question and can only result from detailed negotiations and, above all, from trust, from the local community trusting the company being committed to the local community, the government having stable policies, and the mining companies doing their best. What the environmental social governance criteria allow is for everyone to make those commitments so that they can increase the trust between these various partners who have to share the resulting resources, which is why that kind of ESG approach, the responsible mining approach, is so enormously important to the distribution side as well as to the financing side. And just quickly to acknowledge our colleague here from the European Investment Bank, the public sector banks and development organizations also have a huge role because they can reduce the risk of the initial investment by taking some of the risk themselves, but also they act as a kind of honest broker, so that they too can increase the trust between the various stakeholders and the partnerships, which will result in the distribution.
Thank you very much, Paul. And now your answer, Rinaldo. So can you share examples where circular innovation in the mineral sector supported fair and inclusive energy transition? And how do you see the role of the industry, governments, as well as the finance sector in advancing such approaches?
Thank you for the question, Claudio. Listen, for us in the mine sector, tailings are a liability. No? It takes a lot of money to take care of tailings, especially if they are stored in the tailings dams, for example. Some old mines, 40 years ago, 15 years ago, the technology process is not so good to extract minerals from the rocks. So it's possible to find rich deposits inside tailings dams. What's the problem? The safety. You cannot put a handle in tailings safely because it's so dangerous, no? But there's a lot of, for example, iron ore. Brazil produces a lot of iron ore. You could find a rich deposits inside old tailings dams. The same for gold, for example. The technology to capture gold 40 years ago is not good enough to separate it to obtain gold. Nowadays, you could return in a tailings deposit of gold and extract good potential for this. In fact, Claude, Brazil has a good tradition in recycling. For example, aluminum. Brazil is number one in the world recycling aluminum cans. No, you're recycling 100% of this. Some other industries are going to processing scraps, for example, for steels and copper, but costs a lot of money also. The problems of recycling demands energy. No, it demands a lot of energy to recycling. I think we have some economic challenges, especially related to the costs and the result of this. You have to put in an equation the economic barriers for this, and also technological barriers. No? Not easy to extracting minerals and to concentrating minerals. The good example comes from China. No? They demand the rare earths world, but the beneficiation of rare earths is the key point, for this. So maybe we have to break a new barrier in terms of technology. We are looking for a new technology to be more efficient in concentrating minerals. And of course, there are some social and environmental impacts that have to be considered in the equation. IBRAM launched very recently 2 books about 30 mining companies share their experience in recycling, in circular economy. We have about 60 examples of good projects using tailings, for example, a second use for minerals. A good example comes from Vale. They are producing sands for civil constructions that were in the past tailings for iron ore. No? A good example because you could supply a construction sector, use a different source, because the common source for sandings comes from rivers. You extract from rivers, a lot of environmental impact for this. Some rocks, there are concentration of fertilizers. You could obtain fertilizers from waste rock, from mining waste rock. But the problem is the concentration is so low, you have to spend a lot to obtain the same minerals. You ask also about the role of the stakeholders in this process. Without clear policies, economic incentive policies, we're gonna get in anywhere. You must have a clear message from politicians, from the governments, in terms of adopting circular economy is a key priority for the country. How to manifest this? By incentives. You have to create good incentives, not only economic incentives, but, for example, environmental license. If I have a deposit that was mined in the past, why not facilitate it or recycling environmental license for this? Industry. The word of industry is related to feasibility, studies of feasibility, business, we have to transform this in a business. No? If you invest in new technology to, for example, to concentrate minerals, you have to obtain a return. But the problem in mining is that return is a long-term process. No? How invest in a new mining or how invest in a recycling process? The equation is profit. I have to be profits. And of course, the finance. Professor Paul gave us a not so optimist vision about the relation with the finance, but we need finance. We need finance instruments more adapted. We do not have here in Brazil a good mechanism for traditional mining. Can you imagine for recycling mining? So we are a little bit far in terms of financial mechanisms. Thank you, Claudio.
Well, thank you very much. We are going to pass on to you, Slendi. And what are the steps that governments and other key stakeholders are taking to ensure that these growing investments across the minerals life cycles are contributing to a just and inclusive transition respecting the rights and the interests of indigenous people, local communities, women, and workers in the informal sector?
We must understand that the mines are surrounded by people. We work with people, and if you want to bring minerals, you want to understand that real people want to know what is happening, what is going to happen now and later. And a very important step to take is I am going to go back to the efficiency, but because if we do not work in an efficient way, we will have minerals for the one able to pay for them. If we are efficient in the use of the minerals, the price will be more stable and there will be minerals for everyone. So the pie will be healthy for all of the stakeholders around the mining industry. The public policies, as I mentioned before, must be based on a deep understanding of the local context of the problems related. We all need minerals, but we all are not willing to live beside a mine. When we talk to mining, it is a very conflictive topic. You will listen that not on my backyard, but I want to have the laptop and the mobile and everything, and we want to have internet and energy. So we need to understand that we basically depend on mining to attend the current life habits, and the market is demanding day by day more minerals. When we analyze the real problem, I find a huge problem is informality. Informality comes together with poor labor practices, with negative environmental impact, with low governance, and the worst, the degradation of the ecosystems. So the problem goes back again to the people. The first step is to work to solve this informality in order to bring better labor conditions, more efficient use of the resources, best mining practices, and to improve environmental, technical, and labor standards. The formalization increases the resource efficiency, improve mine practices, and help us to improve the traceability of the minerals that sometimes we bring them and we don't know where do they go. And when we formalize the activities, we are able to reduce the negative environmental impacts associated to the mining processes and help us also to create formal jobs. So again, we go back to the people. Many activities such as environmental restoration, rehabilitation, phytoremediation can be carried out by local communities. So it is an alternative to improve the acceptance and the enrollment. And there are also consultation and participation mechanisms with communities and indigenous peoples that contribute to transparent process and respect for human rights. Enrolling communities and the indigenous peoples attract investments, as it is more attractive to invest in projects supported by communities, and it reduces the conflicts around mining. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. And we discussed yesterday governance and other, reforms are very much needed in our region. The digital public infrastructure supporting traceability. But let's move to you, and perhaps I will try to put two questions because we're running out of time in one. One is how the circular economy contributes to the just and inclusive transitions of the mineral value chains. But I will ask you, Xiaoxiang, to pick up one that we have from the audience. If you could tell us what signals of hope are you seeing in your organization towards a just transition? Thanks.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, giving me two questions. So first, back to the, I think the just inclusive transition of the circular supply chain of critical materials are definitely very essential, and we think a circular economy can provide and can offer some powerful tools to support this transition. I think first on environmental and environmental perspective, we heard a lot, and there are plenty of studies already support the circular economy at its core can support the greenhouse reduction, and also to reduce the biodiversity loss, and also to other, critical environmental and social impacts by reducing the reliance on the virgin resource extraction. So I won't repeat on that part. I want to mention the second point, that circularity has the potential to address the global inequalities. We heard a lot from Selenia talk about it already. Because historically, we've seen a clear imbalance in the way of resources are extracted and used. So many of the resource-rich countries, especially in the global south, often shoulder the environmental cost and the social cost. However, the value gained from these materials are captured elsewhere. So we consider a circular economy has an opportunity to address this dynamic. And if we can design a system, retain value more locally, such as through reprocessing, remanufacturing, or a product design, we can distribute the economic benefit more fairly. And I think this also applies to downstream, where the reprocessing and the recycling infrastructure can be located closer to consumer market, so that will generate the benefits, for the producing countries as well. And another point is regarding circular economy can also create, the inclusive and jobs. We heard a lot as well. Many of the circular activities, such as reuse, repair, recycling, are often labor intensive than the traditional linear model, and also they are typically rooted in the local system. So that means it can give the opportunity or potential to generate more jobs locally, from maybe the marginalized community and also women. Here we also talk about the informal sectors, because we already seeing a lot, informal waste picker or in collection playing a major role in keeping the material in use already. So we can't, neglect those part, and we need to emphasize the role of the informal sectors working past all of that. And to end with that, I think we need to consider how the key is how we design the system right from the outside, from the beginning, and also how we can design the circular activities with justice, this mindset at its core. Otherwise, none of these benefits will achieved. And I think we need to, from the upstream and from the downstream, and also everywhere in the middle, we need to bury that mindset in that.
Thank you very much. No, go ahead.
No, you talk about the hope I see in country organizations. I think I only speak from my personal observation. I think one of the hope I do see is how we talk about, the just inclusive transition during in the renewable energy and also currently in the circular minerals. We do see those discussions domestically and also internationally has gained the attention. We see more and more marginalized people representing the voice. We see all of that in the platform. I think that's to show one of the very promising indicators how we value that. So that's give me the hope of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are running, time's up, but perhaps if you could in 30 seconds, I don't know if you can do that, Dr. Atkins, answer, I think, the first question, one-liner on how we can measure impact of our performance towards just transition. I know it's impossible.
Quite impossible. All I can say is that over the recent years, we do now have systems for evaluating responsible mining. So whether we're talking about the Initiative for Responsible Mining Assurance, IRMA, many mining companies are starting to evaluate their works according to these criteria. There was the Responsible Mining Foundation, which produced 2 really good reports in 2022 and 2023, looking at a number of mining countries and evaluating their performance against about 21 criteria. And there is the Responsible Mining Initiative. Or you can look at the International Council on Mining and Metals, which has 24 of the biggest global mining companies as members, including Vale, which is a member. And they have a consolidated mining standard, which they have tried to bring together different mining standards in order to be able to evaluate the performance of their members, and their members have to make commitments in order to follow these standards. So that's my hope for the future, that actually the mining industry itself is starting to address these issues, and with the environmental, social, and governance finance movement, we can get the money flowing into those companies that make those commitments.
Thank you very much. A big round of applause for our 4 speakers. I will invite you to join the audience, please, so we can make some room for our next speaker and final, which is the Indigenous Peoples speaker, Fanny Cairu Castro, to deliver her final reflections on inclusive, just and human rights-based approaches to the transition through a recorded video.
Una buena tarde para todos y todas. Desde los territorios de la cuenca amazónica traigo una verdad urgente. Y es que no puede haber una transición justa, energética, si no se toma en cuenta a los pueblos indígenas milenarios. No puede haber una transición energética justa si no hay justicia con todos estos hermanos que viven en los territorios y que sufren el olvido estatal. Hoy hablamos del ciclo de vida de los minerales críticos, pero también es importante recordar que estos minerales críticos y los recursos naturales se encuentran en nuestros territorios. Y el extractivismo de estos recursos naturales, de estos minerales, ha significado para nosotros muerte, desplazamiento, contaminación y todas las formas de violencia que sufrimos nosotros en nuestros territorios. Por eso desde la COICA hoy proponemos que la transición energética se base en el respeto a nuestras economías propias, en el desarrollo propio, en el respeto a nuestros derechos, a nuestra cultura, a nuestra espiritualidad, y que también respete esa relación integral que tenemos con nuestros territorios. Por eso esta transición debe apoyarse en tecnologías limpias y también en una política que respete la naturaleza y a quienes cuidan y lo protegen. Y por último, enfatizar que los pueblos y nacionalidades que habitamos este bioma trascendental para el cambio climático somos los guardianes milenarios y cuidadores de este territorio. Y por lo tanto, debemos ser parte de las decisiones y de las inversiones y los beneficios que se generen en la Amazonía. La transición no será justa si no se toma en cuenta a los cuidadores milenarios de este territorio tan estratégico para el planeta, para una Amazonía viva, una humanidad segura.
Vani is the coordinator of the indigenous organization of the Amazon Basin, COICA. So I think we can affirm that with the global shift is beyond the environmental imperative, and we are clearly discussing social and economic opportunities and benefits of this transition. Over the years, the World Circular Economic Forum has been bringing governments, business leaders, and innovators from across different sectors and civil society activists to shape the vision of climate and nature-positive economies of the future. UNDP is part of that global network, assisting countries developing their policies and to unlock and scale up climate and nature finance for a just and inclusive economic transition across sectors. I want to give a special thanks to, of course, our host, the government of Brazil, the state of São Paulo, Citra, the Finnish Innovation Fund, and Finland as one of our core members and donors, the International Resource Panel, and the Brazilian National Confederation of Industry, our esteemed speakers. Once again, thank you very much. So now it's time for lunch. I want to thank you all. Wish you a good lunch and a very successful participation all this week in the debate. Thank you very much one more time.